It's sad.
If I say things will be fine, I guarantee things
we'll be totally fine.
It was a missed opportunity. They're sick of seeing gay couples jump into bed immediately, as if they're horny teenagers.
Welcome to The Right Advice. I'm Randy.
And I'm Amber.
And I'm Lucy.
And today we're talking about episode 3 of The Last of Us on HBO. Let's start with our initial reactions.
I loved it. It was a very good example of good storytelling. So they did a lot of things right. And of course, we're going to talk about that as we move forward.
I very much liked it. So Frank, you don't even have a single line from him in the game. In the game, he is dead already, and you just get a mention of him from Bill. So it was very interesting and very nice to see like their relationship that you didn't really get to see in the game.
For me, I liked individually the story with Joel and Ellie, and I liked individually the story with Bill and Frank. I did have problems with both of them, but I'll go into those at being the editor. That's my job, is to find what doesn't work. But overall, the whole episode, I had one big problem with, and I'll get into that later. But okay. I felt like the two stories should not have been put together. Episode 3 begins in the woods outside of Boston the morning after Tess has used her last moments of life to save Joel and Ellie. Joel is quiet and pensive. Ellie tells Joel it's not her fault that Tess died, and not to blame her for what happened, since Joel and Tess chose to escort Ellie in exchange for a truck battery. On their hike through the countryside to Bill and Frank's, Ellie asks Joel many questions, and Joel answers, despite having little conversational enthusiasm. When Ellie hints that she would like to carry one of Joel's guns, Joel closes that subject of discussion with an abrupt no. They stop at an old general store, where Joel has stashed supplies in the past. While he looks for where the stash is hidden, Ellie explores the back room alone and finds a hidden hatch into a basement. After climbing into the basement, she encounters an infected man who has been pinned under fallen cinder blocks. Using her knife, she cuts the face of the infected person, as though curious about what is inside him, before stabbing him through the skull. Joel was unaware of this encounter. On the road again, Joel and Ellie pass the crash site of a commercial airliner. Ellie marvels that Joel used to fly in airplanes and eat at restaurants, whereas Joel says that this was nothing special at the time. Continuing to answer Ellie's questions, Joel reveals the theories about how the pandemic spread across the world seemingly overnight, that the fungus must have been in something like flour or sugar, which was then distributed throughout the globe. People bought the products from their grocery stores, ate it, and within 24 hours lost control of their bodies. At one point, Joel and Ellie come by a mass grave. Joel explains that in the days immediately following the outbreak, soldiers evacuated people from small towns and told them they were going to quarantine zones. But sometimes the quarantine zones did not have room, so the people were killed instead, because if they were left alive, they could become infected and add to the danger of the world. All right, reactions to this start off.
Excellent. So it starts with Joel building a cairn in memory of Tess. Lovely. So we don't get tell us things, don't tell us I'm sad. They're showing us. And especially because Joel is a person who keeps his emotions inside, so they stay true to the character. He's building this cairn, and he is very much not talking to Ellie. So we can sense that he is mad, and he blames Ellie for the death of Tess. And then Ellie comes in, and she says, it's not my fault, all right? And she gives her explanation. And she's right. It's not her fault, all right? Things happen. Joel and Tess made a decision. Things happened. It's not Ellie's fault. So all of that, very good storytelling. We are not getting the telling like we have seen in other series, a.k.a. Willow. And that's the way it should be. So very good. It's development of character, and it is moving the plot forward at the same time, and it has a nice emotional resonance to it.
Yeah, so that scene also, just a little thing, in this scene, even though Joel is upset with Ellie and is blaming her for Tess dying, he still gave her his jacket to keep her warm.
Right.
So that's another thing of, because...
And he gives her back her sandwich, too. right? I mean, so he looks at it, he's tempted because this is from the previous scene. This is a food.
I think it was some of his rations.
I think it was his rations, yeah.
Okay, then I'm sorry, even more so. So even though he's mad at her, we see that connection building. Yeah.
For me, actually, I did not catch that he was treating her any differently in the beginning of this episode than he was in the previous 2 episodes. So he never really engaged with her. He always kept a distance from her. It was Tess who stayed close to Ellie and had conversations with her. So when she said, "Don't blame me," I thought that came out of the blue. I saw him being kind to her, giving her his jacket, which I didn't see any indication of him giving her anything before this. So if I was going to do this, I would have had a longer scene showing him pointedly ignoring her. But he wasn't treating her any differently from how he was treating her when Tess was alive that I could see. Nothing that was obvious. I saw a man who was mourning and then a girl who said, "It's your fault that she's dead." So for me, that was a very unlikable moment for Ellie. And I know people get on me for not liking Ellie, but I judge characters as an editor on what they do in the present, not what they have done in the past. Their active duty in a story is to, if they are a likable character, do things that positively contribute. And so far, she's only done 2 things that I can see as being positive up until this point. She did engage with Joel in conversation for like 1 second in the hallway in the previous episode. And when Joel was trying to take her away from Tess, she was protesting. So that's all I've seen. So for her to start this off by basically attacking somebody who was in mourning, that didn't make any sense to me as for creating a likable character. So I'm not saying that she won't ever be likable, but she needs to be more likable than not likable before she can be overall considered likable. It would be like saying that, well, it would be like saying Theon Greyjoy, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, he was likable because we knew who he was going to become. He's not likable in the beginning season. He's killing people left and right that we like. So anyway, I would have liked to have seen more likability from her. And I could get into a lot more, like her going down into the basement, putting herself in danger, but that would just make this a really long episode. So,
all right, anyway. So we disagree. I feel that I did pick up that Joel was angry and being even more quiet than normal. And I do, and for me, for Ellie to speak up showed me that she's smart and she is a strong woman character. And I know a lot of times we'll hear complaints that there are not enough strong women characters. And one of the things I do like about this series is we're seeing strong women characters throughout it. And I do love that. So, and then Joel giving her whatever, I think that does speak to his protective nature. But I felt that I saw a difference in his attitude after she said that. As in, he respected her more because she stood up and she spoke the truth. And to me, maybe I'm reading more into it than is there. To me, he's like, okay, that makes sense.
And after she spoke up, he was more willing to give her the information saying, hey, we've got 5 hours ahead of us and then we're going to be at, I don't remember where he said.
Right.
Yeah, I think I would have liked to have seen more interaction before what she said, because that wasn't enough. Because she's been talking and talking and talking, and the only person who's been interacting with her before is Tess. So, and remember, he didn't want to talk to her. He said in the hallway, let's keep our pasts to ourselves. So for me, I would have liked to have seen more interaction happen between them before her comment, because it wasn't enough. Because my entire family read that as, why is she attacking him when he gave her his jacket, he gave her his food, he's still protecting her. He could have just dumped her on the side of the road at this point, but he didn't. Even that's what he has wanted to do this entire time. So depending on what the writers are trying to convey, they can figure out how they want to do this. Maybe they want her to be unlikable to some people until she starts doing more positive things. I don't know, but maybe it's just up for interpretation. Maybe, sometimes that works in a story where you can say, okay, we're going to have them do this, but you're going to be able to interpret it either way that you want it. So,
okay, split decision on that. we obviously are on two different camps on how that scene played out. So then we do move to the general store where Joel has kept supplies, and so it's kind of a cache for when he's out there and he needs to stop by. I don't know what he picked up, ammo or something, whatever it is. So they do stop there, and he gives Ellie a chance to wander around dangerously and get herself into potential trouble, right? So that's all I have on it.
I liked the scene where they're walking right before the mass grave. So Joel is talking about how the outbreak happened, and he mentions that it was in like major food chains and stuff, and he lists off like flour and other stuff, and then he pauses before he says pancake mix, which, if you guys remember, was what Sarah was planning on making him for his birthday, but he didn't buy any, so they had eggs instead. Eggs and eggshells.
Oh yeah, that's right, because they got the eggshells in there. So Graham Cowell, who's got a completely different handle than his name, made a really good comment on our last video that tracks what you're talking about, that brings up all the points in the previous 2 episodes where flour was avoided by characters or brought up, and kind of shows that the writers seem to be sticking with this theory that it spread with flour.
And Granny was eating bread in the opening scene.
Yep. So if you want to see a really good, somebody who's tracked that, go to our previous episode and look in the comments for Graham Cowell, handle wherever, probably below, where he points out basically every single instance that brings up flour or shows flour-related products in some way. For me, I loved that we finally got a theory, and I'm glad that it wasn't something that he said, this is how it happened, because I still have problems with this theory spreading across the world so quickly. Now, if you're writing a science fiction, you have to cover all your bases. You need to tie up all the loose ends. You need to say, okay, there's no loopholes that could make this unbelievable, because that's what we want in sci-fi. We want to look at something that is potentially possible, or it's been made believable in some way. And to say we definitely know it spread from this one flour and grain, it was a flour and grain factory or something, that's not believable, because it takes 16 hours to get from Jakarta to the US, and there's no way that it's going from the factory directly to the US, directly to people's shelves within 24 hours. So there would be regions that get it first, and you would see outbreaks spread very quickly there before it gets to the US. So good on them for making it a theory that people are believing, but not something that is set in stone. And I hope that they stick with that. And we're going to the general store. We did go to the general store.
Well, we did, but no one talked about the zombie that's in there. So
yeah,
I'd like to hear from Lucy. Is that in the game?
It isn't. That whole general store is not in, that is not in the game. But basically, I thought that it was interesting to see more of Ellie's character. So you see that she's like maybe curious about the zombies because, she can't get close enough to one without it tearing her apart. But you kind of see her, to me, she looked kind of angry at it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm interested to see if she explains these feelings, but also she's probably rightfully angry because these zombies kind of, ruined her life. She didn't get to go up in a plane or anything, so.
I'm going to comment that the scene with the store in general, I love Fallout. That's my favorite game. I love post-apocalyptic games, stories, movies. So I loved Joel going there and having a cache hidden away and going in. Just reminded me of playing Fallout, because that's what you do in Fallout. You go into old buildings and you're looking for whatever might have been picked over. Maybe there's just like an item somewhere really well hidden that everyone else has missed for whatever reason. So I did love that scene from a gamer point of view.
For me, I enjoyed the scene as well. I really enjoyed everything with Joel and Ellie, even though I'm only bringing up complaints. That's my job, the editor. I would have improved the scene with Ellie finding the zombie in one way. I would have had her see that it was there and that it was pinned before she went down into the basement, because this was a stupid move on her part. She knows that she just encountered clickers that killed the person she had a connection with. She was close to Tess. So she should be very much affected by that experience, and it seems like it didn't affect her at all. And okay, that's fine if maybe this is something that she's done, but she's still making very stupid decisions. It's clear that these zombies can tear her apart, and that has not affected her at all. She's not afraid of dying. She doesn't care if she lives or dies. Is that what we're supposed to think? She doesn't care that she's endangering Joel. So it should have been, I think, that she noticed, she shines her light down in there, sees the zombie and freaks out and considers telling Joel, there's a guy down here, but then realizes it's pinned, and then a moment of thought where we can kind of see the wheels turning, like, this is my chance to kind of investigate it a little bit and take care of it myself. Like, I can kill it myself. Like, have her get her knife out beforehand or something. But it would have helped with her character being smart, because it was not intelligent for her to go into a dark hole where fungus likes to grow without first checking. So, any more on that?
No.
All right. Remember, we had them coming across the mass grave. Do you want to talk about that part too?
It does give us some backstory that towns, perfectly healthy and fine towns, the people were killed. So we do see that early on, the world remains that way, that the government are monsters. They've been killing healthy, uninfected people that could contribute. So it does build the world and the setting and the feel for the story. So I did enjoy that. I am a little disappointed because when they do a flashback there, and I did like that they moved the flashback to more like the not quite at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I did like that they kind of moved that around. I would have liked to have seen maybe more with that scene and some significance. I mean, maybe all we need to know is that dress belonged to what looked like a very nice lady, and now she's dead because the government decided, it was better to kill lots of people so they don't become zombies.
I agree with you about the change in pattern of the episode. Like, they seem to have this bookend idea where, not really bookend, it was like a starter with the flashback, and this broke that pattern, put the flashback in the middle of the episode instead. So it would have been nice if they stuck to the pattern, but whatever, it didn't kill it. So
do they have that scene in the game?
No.
Okay.
All right, so I don't really have much to say on that particular scene. Just, I thought it was great, and I'm probably just going to cut out this part, me talking right now. So,
thing, when Joel was talking about, hey, we should go this way instead of this way, and she's like, why? Is there something dangerous? And he's like, no, it's not dangerous. She's like, well, why can't I? Because I don't want you to see it. And he specifically says that he doesn't want her to see it. Not that you shouldn't see it. He also says that. But he says, I don't want you to see it, which is another thing of him bringing out that
protection.
Becoming a protector, yeah. The episode continues in a flashback to 2003 in the days immediately following the outbreak. Civilians in a small rural town are evacuated by the military, but one man remains undiscovered, Bill, who is holed up in his secret bunker in his house. When everyone has left, Bill comes out, apparently pleased that he has avoided being found, and now realizing that he is free to protect his house for the coming days without restriction. He helps himself to his neighbors' left-behind belongings, supplies from the stores, and gasoline from the gas station. When the electricity goes out, he breaks into the town gas plant and turns it back on. Then he hooks up an industrial-sized generator near his house and starts it up. He encloses his whole neighborhood with an electric, barbed wire fence and booby traps all around. He plants vegetables, raises chickens, and hunts the nearby forest. He is content in a comfortable life, cooking delicious meals and drinking fine wine, while laughing at stray infected who can be seen in his security cameras wandering into his booby traps outside the fence. 4 years later, Bill is carrying on as usual when a man named Frank falls into one of his booby trap pits. After determining that Frank is not infected, Bill lets Frank out of the pit. But after Frank pleads for food, explains that he is on his way to Boston, and promises that he won't tell anyone about Bill's compound, Bill brings Frank home, allows him to shower, gives him a fresh set of clean clothes, and serves him a cooked meal with wine. Frank marvels at the splendid meal and can't resist insisting on playing the piano before he leaves. He finds the sheet music to Linda Ronstadt, believing that this was Bill's selection. He plays a few lines from a love song, Long, Long Time, but Bill makes him stop. Frank does, but begs Bill to play and promises to leave after that. Bill plays the same song, but with deep emotion. When Frank asks who the girl was that Bill thought of when he played that song, Bill confesses there has never been any girl. Frank then kisses Bill, and Bill returns the kiss with passion. They go to bed together, and Bill reveals that he has only ever been with a girl once, but never before with a man. Frank tells Bill that he will only sleep with him if he can stay for a few more days. At that, the two share an intimate night.
Thoughts?
Oh, I have a ton. All right, so the vast majority of this episode is the story of Bill and Frank, and it is kind of a complete story. So we see this complete story, at least complete as far as it has to do with them in the apocalypse, right? And it was interesting, and there's a couple reactions I have to it. I'm going to throw out the negative because I'd rather focus more on the positive. So there is a sex scene in there between Bill and Frank, right? And, it's just not necessary. And for me, it wouldn't have mattered if it was a guy and a girl or two guys. It just, for me, that's not really an important part of the story. Generally, sex scenes are not super important in conveying some sort of message or characterization. So I'm sure there's probably a couple examples that maybe they do, but normally they don't. So I don't care for that. And I do fast forward through sex scenes, and it doesn't matter who's having the sex. I move through them, and it kind of reduces the enjoyment for me if I have to do that. Now, that being said, this is wonderful storytelling. This is character building. We see Bill, who starts off by himself. He seemed very happy about the apocalypse. Doesn't bother it at all that people are dying, and he's more than willing to shoot more people if they come and bug him. So doesn't seem to be bothered by death or any of that. And then he runs into Frank, and there's a bonding, and it was nice to watch that bonding. Mm-hmm. And there's a lovely example of mirroring. So, and you guys will hear me talk about mirroring as we go on, because mirroring is an ultra effective technique in storytelling. So early on, Frank is able to convince Bill to let him eat some food because he hasn't had anything to eat for 2 days.
This isn't an Arby's.
Right, because it's not an Arby's, right? How silly. So Bill sets it all up, he sets the plate down, and he is really meticulous about turning it to a very specific orientation toward Frank, right? And then Bill goes over to the other side of the table and sits down, and then Frank turns it back to wherever. I don't know that he turns it back exactly to where it was, but he turns it. That's the important thing. And then later in the episode, they do the same thing, and you see that mirroring. And mirroring just, it just kind of adds a depth to a story. Sometimes it points out how things have changed. Sometimes it reinforces how things are the same. Usually, is the character different? Are they the same? Is the relationship the same? This one, I gotta say that I'm not really sure what exactly, other than it's cute. It's rewarding when you see that, and you're reminded of the early romance stage of their relationship, because this comes at the end of their romance, I guess you could say, right? So you do that, and that was kind of interesting. So I love that part. All through it, we see great jobs of building character, and my favorite is their singing. So Frank's like, oh my gosh, there's a piano. Do you mind if I... No, he doesn't say. He doesn't ask. He just plays, right? So he plays a song. And this is a song that apparently is meaningful for Bill, right? And so Frank belts it out kind of show tune style, right? And Bill's like, no. And then he sits down, and Bill plays it with slower and with feeling, right? And in just that moment, we see the personalities. We didn't have to be told that Frank is wild and flamboyant and Bill is quiet and reserved. That song does such a beautiful job of showing how different they are. I mean, it was just, what a great technique, what a great scene.
I have to really comment on what you pointed out, the mirroring. There is so much mirroring in this episode, and I would characterize a lot of it, maybe not exactly mirroring, but thematic repetition or a motif. You see it again and again and again throughout this episode, and it stretches from Ellie and Joel through Bill and Frank, and then back to Ellie and Joel. And really good job on the writers for doing that. I appreciate, as a reader and as a viewer, being able to watch something multiple times and pick up on something different each time. And I've watched this episode 4 times now, and each time I felt like, they did this, or they did that. There was the plates, there's a thing with a pistol later on, the song, absolutely. There was a lot of that, and it was very well done.
And the thing about that is this is really subtle. These are really subtle storytelling. And I would say your average audience, I mean, unless you're really into writing and you know what, you're really familiar with the techniques, you don't pick up on that. But for the viewers, or if it's a book, for the readers, these are things that the readers or viewers are just like, oh, I'm loving this, and they don't know why. But they do. This kind of repetition that reinforces emotions or messages or themes, and whatever it is that they're doing, it just feels great, and you get a greater sense of it, rather than being told whatever message or emotion or reaction, right? Let us watch it, let us enjoy it. And then if you really want to amp up that message, that theme, that emotion, you repeat it.
So I liked this part. Just like I said, we didn't know Frank in the game, and I like what they did with Bill's character. They changed it a little bit. It's still very much Bill. You can tell even from a mile away, it's still Bill. But he's doomsday prepper. He's extremely paranoid. He's very gruff. Doesn't do emotions very well.
Worse than Joel.
Worse than Joel. But in the show, you get this sense that he appreciates the finer things in life. So he's got the food, and he gets out his like fine china and wine every night.
Yep.
And not too keen on cleaning, but
I felt like it was only in his house where the finer things could be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like just everything outside, I don't care. I'm just
my
going to
little
survive,
world.
but I can have a little bit of comfort here.
And that becomes really apparent because Bill and Frank have that argument.
Yep.
Like, no, you got to let me paint.
We're almost there. We're
the
almost
boutique,
there.
the hardware store, and the boutique. Okay, and that's so totally right. Mm-hmm. And you see that Bill's like, no, all we need is a house, and it doesn't have to be beautiful. And Frank's like, no, what's worth? Why is life worth living if we can't enjoy the beauty and everything? I mean, so yeah, really beautiful characterization and interaction. I mean, I really loved it.
Yep. Okay, on to the editor stuff. So I had a complaint about a missed opportunity here. For me and everyone in my entire family, we did not pick up, and I've watched this 4 times, there was not a receptiveness that was truly vulnerable on the part of Bill until they were in the middle of singing that song. And then suddenly they're kissing, and then in the very next scene, they're having sex. So my complaint here was that there was a missed opportunity by putting their intimacy, their physical connection, so early in their meeting. They've not even known each other for an hour, and they're jumping into bed together. And this is what doing that in a story costs. It costs the anticipation of them getting together. 2 people you want to be together, but aren't. So that's gone. So all we're getting now is 2 people who are together, and we want them to stay together. It is not as weighty. There's not as much gravity in that scenario. So the writers, I think, actually should have moved the intimacy to much later. And then there's a couple things you could do. Okay, let's say we want to keep it where it is, okay? We want to keep it where it is because we want the bulk of this story to be about how they really were 2 opposites that were trying to stay together. And I get that. That's okay. But they should have built it up better with Bill. He was happy with his situation until Frank arrived. He actually didn't like that Frank was there. He was uncomfortable having some outsider inside his zone. I would have liked to have seen more of him being unhappy. Now, some people like to be alone, but we never saw him being unhappy alone. We didn't see him having that loneliness. I would have probably preferred, though, not to have this intimate scene so soon. I would have liked to have seen it happen later, and we'll get to that part, but the strawberry bit, I think, was the part where we really see Bill starting to change. I think it should have happened closer to that scene, either right before or right after, something. So here was my problem with this bit here. Bill also did not, he made a huge, monumentally huge leap in the space of 5 minutes. Because, I mean, he went from somebody who was, and this was something revealed in the sex scene, because they're laying in bed together, and Frank asks Bill, have you ever done this before? And Bill says, only once, but with a girl a long time ago. So this is somebody who has only been intimate with another person once a long time ago. And he said girl, not woman. So I'm thinking that must have been at least 30 years ago, right? I would assume about 30 years. He looks like he's in his 50s, right? I would assume. So this is somebody who has been seemingly contented. Now he's not only vulnerable, going to give into his homosexuality for the first time, because if this has been repressed, I mean, this is a monumental thing for it to happen, and it was too short. I did not find it believable, and I have had discussions about this with my family has a lot of gay friends, gay couples, and they're sick of seeing gay couples jump into bed immediately as if they're horny teenagers. Like, can we build up?
As if all homosexuals are, horny teenagers who can't control themselves, and that's not the case. I mean, obviously.
And if they weren't going to build up that Bill was longing for intimacy, they shouldn't have done this. So there was a lot of problems with us. I could really go into the details of it, but that was the big one. Was now, unfortunately, because this happened so earlier in the relationship, a lot of the tension that other people felt during this story and a lot of the emotional draw that they had, it was already soured for me, because it's like they've already slept together, they've already done it, and it was kind of unbelievable. So it didn't resonate with me, and I wanted it to.
Right, I feel that it cheapens the romance, and I'm going to tell you that this episode with Bill and Frank, that is as good a romance story as I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
They are very engaged. It's very believable that they love one another. But this, and especially like you said, there's no reason why Bill, who hates people, right, and doesn't want strangers, within a couple hours, boom, he's in bed and having sex with someone he barely knows. That is so out of character.
Yeah, it was very out of character.
Yeah, so it cheapens the meaningfulness of the romance itself. So, and that's kind of why I'm against sex scenes in general. It is, to me, they're cheap. They go to a lower level and they don't represent love. And I'd rather see them expressing love rather than, the physical act of sex. So
I do actually enjoy a good sex scene if it's done tastefully and there was a good build up. Like I will say that, like Outlander, when the two characters finally get together on their wedding night, I was all for it. I was like, oh, this is so good. Thank you. Like, we've been waiting for these two characters to get together. But for this, it was cheap because it was cheap. Because they jumped into bed without really knowing anything about each other and not really having an emotional connection. And it wasn't built up that they needed this connection. So it was a missed opportunity. But I kind of get that they wanted this story to be about them struggling to stay together. I just think that a little bit of rearranging could have added so much more. A little rearranging of the scenes. I would have liked to have seen Bill and Frank living together as friends. Like, maybe Frank got hurt when he fell in the hole, and he has to stay for a few more days. And Bill starts to come to enjoy his company, and we see him starting to contemplate, he's going to leave someday. I don't want him to leave. I want him to stay. And that could be the beginning of them. But I get it. They had a short amount of time. So
I agree. I think it could have been improved, but the techniques they used on the romance part of it
was effective.
Were excellent.
Yeah.
Lucy, what do you think?
I think they're really cute together. I like them. I
agree.
They're the writers. No, I don't have a whole lot to say.
I liked them together too. I thought they were great. I just didn't like how it started because it could have been better.
So if you are out there and you're thinking, I want to write a romance, you know what? Other than that sex scene, this is a perfect example. Look what they did. It's beautiful. It dragged out a lot of emotion in me, and yeah, that's a perfect template for a romance. So there you go. If you're an aspiring romance writer.
Reminded me a lot of Up.
It did. Oh, so much. Which, in my mind, Up has the very best opening sequence of any movie ever, because we just see him and his wife and the relationship, and it's so beautiful. Yeah, it makes me cry when I watch that. It's so beautiful, and you know their story, and it's done in what, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes,
It's
5
very
minutes,
short.
very short, and you have an entire story about a husband and wife who loved one another. Yeah, beautifully done.
3 years after Frank's arrival, he is still living with Bill. They are in a heated argument where points of contention between the two men have surfaced. Frank wants to clean up and maintain the yards and exteriors of the other houses and some of the shops in the neighborhood inside the compound. Bill doesn't want to waste the paint or the gasoline for a lawnmower. Frank states that before the pandemic, he was part of the world, but Bill was not, distrusting everyone and everything. Bill sees survival as the top and sole priority, allowing for moderate extravagances only inside their home, but Frank wants to take pride in the rest of the compound by cleaning it up, and he also wants to share it by having friends come and visit them. Bill seems to be willing to listen to Frank, but unwilling to bend without protest. He tells Frank that they will never have friends because there are no friends to be had, and Frank reveals that he has been talking to a nice lady on the radio. This surprises and infuriates Bill. In the next scene, Bill and Frank are hosting a refined lunch on their lawn with Tess and Joel. Frank and Tess are getting along swimmingly, but Bill has his pistol out on the table and is cautiously eyeing the mostly quiet Joel. Frank is determined to work with Tess, but Bill is less enthusiastic. Tess and Joel both express that they understand Bill's feelings, and while Frank is showing Tess something in the house, Joel is left with Bill and elaborates. He says he would feel the same way as Bill if their roles were reversed, but explains that there are advantages to a working relationship. He points out that Bill's electric fence is corroded and explains that he could not only get him the materials to replace the fence, but materials that would last a lifetime instead of a few years. He also warns Bill that while Fedra and the infected are not likely to bother the compound, raiders would surely come one day. Bill states that he believes he and Frank don't need anyone else, but Frank has already started a friendship with Tess, suggesting a music-by-the-decade-based code to use over the radio.
And it's so character-driven, right? And so here again we see that layer, that repetition. So Frank is very excited. They made friends, and Bill's like, "No, we don't have friends. We don't have friends." And Frank's like, "No, we've got friends. We're going to invite them over.
Friends.
We're going to invite them over for dinner." And yeah, so to see that interaction between those two is delightful. And then, of course, we have the dinner, and it's beautiful that. So we've got Bill and we have Joel, and really, they're kind of like the same person, right? They don't communicate well with others. They don't want friends, and to just as soon shoot you, right? So we have them, and then we have Tess and Frank, who are hitting it off. They're good friends now because they've been talking on the radio, and you can see that they're going to start trading and being an advantage in post-apocalyptic society. I loved it.
Yeah, so I also really liked this scene. Little weird to see Joel young again, but so it was very good show of like their character and everything. So Tess and Frank are hitting it off. They're the people persons. People persons.
They're people.
So they're like the people persons, and so they get along well with others. They do all the talking, the negotiating, the figuring out the semantics of their deal. And then Frank is, or Bill has, his gun on the table. He's like pointing it right at Joel. And then you see Joel is like very like casual about it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm the same way." And then Tess and Frank get up, and Joel's like, "Okay, now you need to get out of my face."
Yeah, get that gun out of my face.
Yep. And then he plays more to what Bill is actually like, which is also similar to Joel, which plays into the protective nature, because Bill and Joel are both very protective over the ones that they love. And so he's like, "Yeah, that fence isn't going to hold. Yeah. In order to keep you and Frank safe, you guys need better protection." And you see in the next scene, but...
Yeah, so that's something I don't have a whole lot of, as an editor, negative to say about this scene. Either of these scenes. They were both great. They were perfect. I thought they were concise. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. I enjoyed them immensely, especially seeing Joel and Tess interact. I liked seeing Tess again. I thought she's a great character. I was sad that she's gone. So I liked seeing it. And something that this has the motif of the, this is a different type of motif. And I don't even know if there's a term for this, but I've called it parallel mirroring. And this is where you have a separate storyline that in a way reflects the main storyline. So this especially just shows, like what you're saying, that this is Joel and Tess reflected in Bill and Frank. And it's great to see them at the table sitting across from their counterpart like that.
Right, and you can imagine that really, even though we haven't seen Joel and Tess's journey before, by watching Bill and Frank, kind of we're watching Joel and Tess, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing.
Possibly at an earlier stage, you know.
In an early, right. So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I love that term, parallel mirroring. If that's not a term already, I'm going to start using it because that's a great concept. And I'm going to go back to the gun thing with Joel. And so, I mean, what I really love about it is Joel waits until the social parts of the teams walk away, and then he lets Bill know, you don't get that out of my wet face, we're going to have a problem right here. So he waited to the appropriate time, because otherwise, Tess would be like, Joel, no, we're not going to be shooting people, right? So you can totally picture.
These are our friends, Joel.
These are our friends, Joel.
You can see that there's a bit of an appreciation for their partners. Like, I will do what they kind of want to do a little bit, but it's nice to see couples not being butting heads with each other all the time. Even though we just saw Frank and Bill butting heads, we're seeing them trying to make this work, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So, I actually wanted to bring up something about the fencing thing. So at the end of that comment, so Joel says, you should fix this. I could help you fix that. And just remember in this scene that Bill is like, we'll be fine at the end of that. And I'm going to leave that at that. This is, as an editor, this is something that sticks in your head when you're watching. Like, okay, he has said it will be fine. End of story. What happens next? Do we have more on this bit?
Only on what you said. I mean, as a writer, if I say things will be fine, I guarantee things won't
be totally
be fine.
That happens later on too, and I can talk about that when we get to that scene.
3 years after meeting Tess and Joel, Bill has reinforced his corroded fence with stacks of cars, indicating he has not taken up Joel's offer to get new fencing material. Frank takes Bill to a secret strawberry patch that he has been cultivating on the far side of the compound. As Bill tastes one of the strawberries, he laughs and tears fill his eyes. He apologizes to Frank for getting older faster than Frank and confesses that he was never afraid before Frank arrived. Frank is touched by this. In the next scene, Frank awakes in the middle of the night to the sound of explosions and gunshots and the light of blazing fires outside. Bill is nowhere to be seen, so Frank grabs a pistol from his desk and goes outside. He finds Bill exchanging fire with raiders who have attacked the compound in the night. Bill is shot in the side, and Frank brings him into the house to treat his wound. Bill explains that the booby traps and electric fence will take care of the rest of the raiders, but believing that he is dying, Bill tells Frank that he has written instructions and copies of all the keys, as if telling Frank where to find them when he is dead. Frank is certain Bill will survive, but Bill tells Frank that he must call Joel because he does not believe Frank can be alone, and he believes that Joel will take care of him.
So the strawberry scene is great, and it does move forward the romance. And so that's good, right? I mean, that's probably, instead of a sex scene, I felt that was way more effective than the sex scene in showing the love between them. But what it also shows is how in this society, in this situation, you can miss some of the simple things. So well-grown strawberries, beautiful strawberries. I mean, to bring a tear to your eye because that's something you haven't had forever. I mean, maybe something you really love, maybe something that brings up memories before the apocalypse. And to me, that was great. So I did both. I mean, it's pulling double service there, romance-wise and then also remembrances of the way life used to be and what we are missing out on now.
Yeah, I have to totally agree that this was Bill's most poignant moment, I think.
Yeah.
Because he's crying and laughing at the same time at just the flavor of the strawberries. And up until now, it wasn't exactly clear what was going on because, like I said, there was no build up before Bill crying at the piano. It just sort of happened. At this point, we know what is going on. We can see that there have been struggles of him trying to understand Frank, and here he gets it. So you'll notice in this scene, and like I said, I've watched this 4 times, the town doesn't look any better than it did when Frank and Bill were having that argument about I want to fix it up. So this tells me that Bill did not allow Frank to go around and make these changes and also the fence is still corroded. We see stacks of cars that are being used to reinforce the fence. So he didn't take up Joel's offer of trade. And remember, this is only 3 years later after meeting Tess and those guys. So it's possible that Bill was like, no, we're still staying in our ways. This moment with the strawberries, I would have liked to have seen another scene after this. Unfortunately, the next scene is in the dark. I would have liked to have seen another scene after this that indicates that after this, he starts to give in. He lets Frank tidy up the houses and paint them and mow the lawns. He gets a stronger fence from Joel and Tess. I would have really liked to have seen that. But again, I get it. We're constrained, we're stuck on the time. But yeah, because the next scene, everything is dark, you can't really tell if he has allowed this to happen. The only patch of ground that looks nice is the area immediately surrounding the strawberry patch. You can see Frank has raked the leaves and he has painted the wall of the house that's right there. It looks very nice. So it's like his secret little patch. And I would have liked to have seen Frank go, I want more of this. So go ahead.
Yeah.
So one of the lines here in the strawberry scene, which is very, very cute. I love this scene between them. But Bill at one point says, I'm sorry I'm getting older faster than you, which is a hint at the next flash forward, I think. But comes into play a little later.
Okay. Oh, no, we've included that in the summary. So what do you want to tie it into?
Oh, the 10-year flashback forward.
Oh, that bit. Oh, okay, yeah, I see. All right, so the next flashback. the next flashback.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do we have anything to say about the attack in the night or more about the strawberries?
Where does he say... Okay, so there's a line that comes in, and I don't remember exactly where it is. I'm not sure if it's the strawberry or the attack. No, you don't know what line I'm going to say, so you need to wait.
I looked to your phone.
Oh, so it's the strawberry?
I think it is the strawberry.
What line?
Wait.
It is, I was never afraid...
Strawberries.
Before you showed up.
Mm-hmm. Strawberry scene.
Don't cry.
I won't do the zoom in on you this time.
So,
it was touching. It was great. This was Bill's most poignant moment. It really was. And yeah, it was so well done, this part right here. I really enjoyed it. I'll keep talking, Randy, so you don't have to.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to move us on to the attack in the middle of the night. So we've had a bit of a time jump. Frank, I don't need to go into it. I loved in this scene that, number one, Frank is awakening to find that Bill is already taking care of the problem. Sticks with Bill's character and Frank's character. Frank needs protection. He didn't wake up before the Raiders got there or whatever. But Bill did, and he's a badass, so he's going to go out and take care of this problem on his own.
That's how he survived so long.
Yes. Except for some reason he didn't have cover while he was shooting.
Yeah,
He should have, yeah.
He's not a really smart guy, because I would have totally hid behind cover.
I think it would have been perfectly reasonable for him to have been behind cover and then maybe stand up to tell Frank to get back in the house or something and get shot then.
Oh, that'd have been so much more poignant, right? Because then that would have, he got wounded because of his protective nature. Oh, that'd have been better. Rather than standing in the open.
Yeah.
Begging to be shot.
Yeah. I was sitting there going duck and cover. I know that's for bombs, but it's a similar situation here. I really loved how the first thing that Bill thought of as he believes he is dying is to get Joel. Because there's one person I know who's
All right, so
on the same...
you're kind of missing a stage. So Bill does get shot.
Yeah.
And Frank pulls him in the fence, and the fire and everything. All of Bill's defenses finish off the bad guys because he's done a great job of that. And so Bill is dying, he thinks. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So Bill believes that he is dying, and the first thing that he thinks to tell Frank, is to go contact Joel. Joel will protect you. His first thought is, I need to protect this person. And this gets into the parallel mirroring and the motif of, in the themes of Joel is Bill. And Bill realizes, I need somebody to replace me, and it's Joel. We are already the same person, even though, we don't really like each other, but we're still sort of friends. That's what has to happen. So I loved that. It really ties these two storylines together in up front. It almost weaves the two together. So I appreciated that a lot. No complaints. No complaints this scene, other than Bill should have been behind cover, but it was all great. I loved it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
I don't have anything to say about this scene.
And even though they may not be friends, I get the sense that they both respect each other a lot and would trust each other and their loved ones' lives with the other person. So in a way, that's kind of a friendship. That's like the gruff guy friendship, right? Like, I hate you. But, if something happens, take care of it. Yeah.
Those are the fun ones. You're like, I get it. I totally get why they are frenemies.
It's like, I hate your guts. I'm going to go. You watch this person for me.
Those are so entertaining. You know what? This is one of those things where people say, oh, you should try to break the mold and all this stuff. But this is an example of something that people just love to see, this sort of thing. So
yeah.
10 years later, it is now August of 2023. We see that Bill has survived the gunshot, but Frank is unwell and in a wheelchair. From the deteriorating quality of Frank's paintings, from his apparent inability to eat solid food, and his struggle with fine motor skills, it is apparent that Frank has been suffering from a degenerative disease such as ALS. Bill is now caring for Frank's every need with patience and kindness and love. One morning, Frank tells Bill that he does not want to continue living this way. He would like to have one more day and requests that Bill do all the things that he wants to do. Broken and sobbing, Bill agrees. Dressed nicely, they sit at the piano where they first kissed and exchange rings and marriage vows. Bill cooks the same meal for Frank that he made for him on the first day, even though Frank is hardly able to eat it. Then, as Frank requested, Bill pours 2 glasses of wine, then adds a packet of crushed pills into Frank's glass, a lethal dose. It is only after both of them have finished their glasses that Frank guesses that Bill had also put a lethal dose of crushed pills into the bottle before pouring. Bill confesses that he is old and satisfied with his life, and that Frank was his purpose. Frank states that he disagrees with Bill's choice, but that he is touched by the romantic gesture. At that, Bill brings Frank back to their bed to hold each other in their final moments. Any reactions to this bit?
It's sad.
Very sad.
One thing. So when we immediately get into this flash forward, you see somebody sitting in a wheelchair, and this is a far away, so you can't tell who it is. So you immediately assume that's Bill, who just
got shot.
Who got shot, and he didn't heal well, so he can't walk very well, so he has to be in a wheelchair. And then you see that no, it's Frank in the wheelchair. And then that hints back to what I was saying in the strawberry scene, where Bill says, "I'm sorry, I'm getting older than you." Older faster than you.
Good tie-in. I like that.
Yeah.
Sort of reversal of what Bill's expectations were. But it stuck with their scenario where Bill is the protector. Mm-hmm. Bill is the one who makes sure that Frank stays alive. So, anything, Rainey?
It was very sad.
Mm-hmm. Very sad. Very good job, I think, at this point. A scene like this is only successful if the build-up has been done right. And we could get into other shows and movies that have done this poorly. This was done so well. It's just like in Up, where you get to the end of that montage in the beginning and you're bawling your eyes out. And part of it's the music, which is meant to pull emotion out of you. But you didn't need much to understand what these people were going through and be rooting for them. You've seen them struggle and come out of struggle. You've seen them really striving to have dreams and future that they want to have together, and then you see it fall apart. So it's really well executed building up to this death, save the complaints I've had before. I have one note. Anybody have anything?
It is really sad because it shows the depth of the love between these two people. That's what makes it sad. So it's sad in a beautiful way.
I totally agree. It is. I'll keep talking, Randy. So something that I thought was interesting. So my sister is studying medicine, and she's trying to be a doctor. She's in medical school. And she said, I think he has ALS. I think that Frank has ALS. It doesn't, somebody in another video on the channel said cancer, but I think it's not that, because his muscles seem to be deteriorating. He's losing his fine motor skills. He can't really chew, but he's clearly all there mentally. And we don't see him as being necessarily in pain, just that he can't function anymore. So I thought this was an interesting choice of disease for Frank to have, because in a way, it reflects the fungus. Because with the fungus, you lose your mind. You no longer have a mind. And of course it makes you super strong and fast, and you can go do all these things. But in Frank's case, his mind is in perfect tact. He's totally there, same Frank as before, all the way to the end. But his body is going. He's lost control of his body.
So he chooses to die rather than deteriorate. So Lucy, why don't you tell him how Frank dies in the game?
In the game, all right. So in the game, you show up to Bill's city, and they start talking. They're like, Joel's like, "Where's Frank?" And Bill says, "He skipped out on me." And you go through the city for this whole section of the game, and you think, Frank just kind of left him. And then they're trying to find a car battery, and they know where one is, but it's in a highly infected area. So they go through this, and then they get to the car that's supposed to have a battery in it, and it's not in there. And Bill says, "Somebody took my thing. I don't know who took it. There's nobody in this town." But then you get out of there, and you go into like a house that's safe, and you find Frank hanging.
He killed himself.
He killed himself.
Was he sick?
He was, because he went in to get the car battery for Bill, and then he got bit, and instead of turning, he killed himself, and he left a note for Bill saying, "I know you're too cowardly to come over into this part of town, but in case you ever do, I hate your guts." And basically that
was a different relationship, I guess.
It was. You're so... You can get from the gist of the note that he is so upset at Bill because Bill is so stubborn, but he really does love him because he went all the way to this infected part of the town to get this car battery for him.
Okay, so Bill didn't really even know why he left.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's sad.
We get this parallel mirroring, right? So in the game storyline and in the show storyline, where Frank chooses to die rather than be overcome by his malady. So I think that is interesting.
Yeah.
They're both together.
Nice. Parallel mirroring is going to be a thing.
It is now.
It's going to be a thing.
And you probably heard it here first.
I hope so. I made it up. Okay, do we have more on this? The two of them dying?
Not without me crying horribly, and I don't want to do that.
It was really sad. It made me cry a lot.
Definitely. I was sad. I wanted to be sadder, but it was good. This whole bit was good. In the present day, once again, Joel and Ellie arrive at Frank and Bill's compound. When Bill doesn't let them in, Joel keys in the gate code, indicating that at some point Bill shared it with him. They go into Bill and Frank's house, finding it silent, with unfinished plates of dried-up, rotten food and a layer of dust over the table. Joel searches the house, unable to get into the downstairs bedroom, and returns to the living room to find that Ellie has discovered and read a letter left by Bill for whomever, but probably Joel. At Joel's request, Ellie reads the letter aloud. Bill explains in the letter that they have decided to die, and their bodies are in the bedroom, so not to go in there, and that the window is open so that there won't be a smell. He says that he believes Joel will understand when he says that he used to hate the world and was glad when everyone died, but he was wrong, because there was one person worth saving, and that's what he did. He saved him, and then he protected him. That is why men like them are here. They have a job to do. Bill then says that he leaves all of his belongings and supplies and weapons to Joel so that he can keep... Ellie stops reading the letter before saying Tess's name. Joel tells Ellie to stay put and then takes the letter outside to read again alone. He breathes and crumples the letter, then goes into the garage where the truck is and finds all that he needs to assemble and charge a battery for it. Returning to the house and finding Ellie just where he left her, Joel tells her that he has a brother in Wyoming who is in trouble that he is trying to find. His brother used to be a firefly and might know where this lab is in the West where they are working on a cure. Joel tells Ellie she can come along on the 3 conditions. She is never to mention Tess again, and they are to keep their pasts to themselves. She must never reveal her condition to anyone, as they will surely kill her without thinking things through, and she must agree to obey all of Joel's orders. Ellie agrees. They both shower and find changes of clothes, then gather as much supplies as they can and load it into the truck. Ellie comes across Frank's pistol in the desk and secretly puts it in her backpack. They climb into Bill's truck, and Ellie marvels at it, having never been in a car before. She finds a cassette and puts it into the player, and they listen to the same song that brought Bill and Frank together, and they leave the compound and drive off into the West.
Right, so the letter. I love the letter because Bill has written this, and and of course Bill leaves all the weapons to Joel. Right, you can have them. Anything here you can have. There's a ton of weapons. You can have them. Right, and it felt so appropriate for the for Bill and Joel. Right, because they're gun guys, and that would be meaningful. And the way he phrases it, it's like I've never liked you. Right, and then what else did he say?
But I never liked you, but we're kind of friendly, kind of like friends, something like that.
So, but you can tell through it, he's leaving Joel, and obviously he has great love for Frank, but he's leaving Joel his most precious things, which are the guns. Right, they're Joel's. Boom. So that was touching too. Mm-hmm. And funny.
It was very funny.
I love just the note, the part in the note where he's like, I can't remember what it was, but it was basically him saying like,
was it the hee hee hee?
The hee hee.
Yeah, it was where he was talking about how
the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders were gonna get finished off by his fence. He loved that. To him, it was entertainment because he didn't have cable TV or Netflix, so he would sit down and watch people run into his electric fence and booby traps.
So earlier, there's a scene where one of the zombies is walking along, and he's got a
tripwire.
He's got a tripwire with a bring on the sound off alarm. He can watch it on the cameras, right? And the zombie comes along and trips a shotgun trap and blows it, shoots it in the head. And he's like, yeah, that never gets old.
See, I'm telling you, he loved being on his own. Like
he did.
A lot of people, I think, would look at that and go, wow, that is a sick person. But he was happy. He was happy being like that. Yeah, so I have a big long thing, so I'm going to wait until you guys have said your things. I'm just going to read it fast.
That's it. I only have something at the very end.
Again, this was just more of Ellie and Joel's like relationship and their dynamic. And once again, Ellie's like, please let me have a gun. There's a wall full of them. And he's like, I'm not giving a gun to a 14-year-old. That's not smart. But yeah, and then
she finds the gun in the desk.
Frank takes it anyway.
And that's Frank's gun, I think. Or at least the one that Frank grabs when he goes out to help Bill.
It's, I think, also the one that was on the table when he first meets Joel and Ellie.
I have to double check that. I thought it was a different one, but it could have been for sure.
It's definitely the same gun that he goes when he sees Frank. He meets Frank,
So, okay. I have a lot to say on this next bit, and because I wanted to make sure I said it all right, I kind of wrote it down. so I'm going to try to get through this as fast as I possibly can. This is Ellie's first significant moment being a member of Team Jolie and Ellie. She is obedient when Joel takes the letter and tells her to stay put. And this is the first time that she's been obedient that I can recall. He comes back after reading the letter outside by himself and building a battery, and she hasn't even left the chair that she was sitting in. Then she seems to be about to express to Joel some sort of remorse about Tess, when Joel basically says that he doesn't want to talk about Tess, which he has every right to say. So I mean, that is just so nice to see that she, even though she's doesn't need to apologize, she's acknowledging that he has some hurt feelings about Tess. Anyway, Ellie certainly hasn't shown much in the way of being upset that Tess is dead up to this point, even though I thought that they bonded in the last episode, and I thought that she was upset at the idea of abandoning Tess to die alone. So this was a good moment. And I really do want to see a little more from Ellie in that regard, being, like, oh, I kind of liked Tess too. So the next agreeable thing that Ellie agrees to do is that she's going to obey him. She agrees to obey him going forward.
What you say goes.
Yeah, what you say goes. And she did steal his pistol, or not his pistol, but the pistol she found in the desk. Which,
Bill's pistol.
Yeah, Joel did not want her to have a gun, but I was okay with it at this point because she finally did more positive in a scene than negative. And that is the kind of thing that makes a character really likable, is when they contribute positively more. And banter and teasing and stuff like that is okay, but you have to earn that status of being able to shoot insults at somebody so that we know they don't mean it. This is how they banter. And finally, in the last moments of the scene, Joel expresses that he's really enjoying the music that they're listening to in the truck, and Ellie doesn't shoot it down. She says, it's better than nothing, which, she could have said, it's stupid, and she didn't, so good. I like that Ellie is being compared to Frank in very subtle ways, such as her telling Joel to shower, just as Frank told Bill to shower. And I like that the gun that Ellie finds is Frank. I also like the thing that Ellie and Joel are finally in agreement on is the song in the truck. Like, this is the first time we see them, really agreeing. Remember, when they were looking at the plane, she was saying how cool it must have been to fly, and Joel was like, it wasn't cool, it was just, a thing. But now they have a kind of agreement on something. This is a good song. And this is the same song, so this is a song that has brought them together. And it's the same song that brought Frank and Bill together. So it's not just a thematic repetition of this, Bill's and Frank's song. It is actually a song being used to bring two people together. So good on there. Here's my big complaint. I like the stuff with Ellie and Joel. I like the stuff with Bill and Frank on their own. The Ellie stuff and the Joel stuff was good, gets an A+ on its own. The Frank and Bill stuff gets an A, kind of a minus for me on there because of the opportunities missed that I talked about earlier. Together and in the context of the bigger picture of this story, I felt disappointed and let down. Overall, I feel that Joel and Ellie's journey it barely moved, and it's supposed to be the main point of this whole story. I thought it was totally inappropriate to have totally appropriate to have a beat where Ellie is learning about people being evacuated from the rural towns and then killed, and then coming across Joel's letter. That's appropriate. But it didn't need to be this long, and it should have involved Ellie and Joel, not outsiders who aren't even in the story. So when considering what we are left with at the end of Bill and Frank's story, whose only significance in the presence was a couple of sentences in a letter left by Bill, and those sentences in the letter could have meant just as much to the audience with far less context. I watched this and really looked for it and thought, would these words mean more? And although now we know what Bill and Frank's story, the words mean something to us because of how they affect Joel. And we didn't really need a whole lot more to know exactly how these words are going to affect Joel. This is somebody who was protecting somebody else, and that's what he was doing with Tess. So it's going to affect him the same way. I would have fixed this whole situation by Bill still being alive when Joel and Ellie arrive. And maybe even having him going on the journey with them for a while. This is where I brought up in my notes that I couldn't help think of Pixar. That montage in the beginning is important because it explains Carl's behavior in the present. So through the whole rest of the movie, it makes certain moments and things that happen in the story significant because we know what his past was and how it relates directly to what's happening. But Bill and Frank are dead. The only thing that's tying Bill and Frank's story to this story is literally those sentences in that letter. So I think that this could have been cut down a whole lot. Now, Tess was in the show for 2 out of 3 episodes, and she's still a big mystery. So I'm expecting that we're going to have more about her and Joel. I really hope so, because if they don't, I feel let down. Like, we got these insignificant characters. I mean, they was nice, but they were not significant in the present because they're dead. So I would have liked to see more. I would like to see more of Tess now, a lot more of Tess and what her story was. So I'm expecting that that's going to happen. But at the same time, I also don't really think that flashbacks with Tess are needed. But whatever, if that's the thing. So the final note that I have for this is that if this is setting the precedent for future episodes where we see very little of Joel and Ellie interacting together and growing together because of their interaction, this is not a story for me personally, just because I want emotion, but relating to these two characters. And all of this emotion really had very little to do with these two characters. And if we were going to do tales from the apocalypse, this is good. That was an effective way to do it. But I felt like it was a very long period of time taken away from Joel and Ellie's story. I don't feel like there's a change, but we could have done so much more with Joel and Ellie that we did not. So that's my general note about this. I skipped a ton of so you're welcome, everybody. But anyway, you get it.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the end scene. Mm-hmm. And so they are driving off. They are playing the music, and it is the same, right? And I want to talk about how really powerful in film music can be, right? So this, because the sound of the tone of the music sets a mood, right? And then also, if you can find the right song, the lyrics can be super powerful. And so when it's playing, I'm going to have Lucy read this because I'll just start crying otherwise. So the lyrics say,
I think I'm going to love you for a long, long time.
So we have the power of music and song telling us that indeed the relationship between Joel and Ellie has changed. And at least this really applies to Joel. And I'm sure that Ellie's also changed. But this applies to Joel. And he has finally accepted her. So we can kind of look at her now, kind of officially in Joel's mind, as his new daughter. And so for me, it was super powerful.
And I think not only does that line in the song apply to Joel seeing Ellie, I think maybe not right now, but at some point throughout the game, Ellie is going to start seeing Joel in that way as well. It's like, it's just a fatherly thing. And that's even more apparent in the second game. You get to see more of Ellie's character because you play Ellie in the second game.
You blew one of my predictions now.
Anyway,
sorry. Keep going. No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, I think that's both of them seeing each other like that. So.
And then I have one last item, which is I really loved that Ellie displays the wonder of the world that is past. She talks about planes, and they have a whole discussion. They're like, what was it to fly? And Joel, of course, is like, oh, I got crammed into a seat, and I had to pay $12 for a meal, right? And that's what you expect Joel to respond to. But she's like, but you got to fly, right? And so she gets in the truck, and she's like pushing buttons, and like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
It's like
right?
a cockpit.
She calls it a spaceship.
Yes.
Like a spaceship.
No,
go ahead.
Real quick, in the second game, you get a flashback between Ellie and Joel where he takes her to a museum and they sit in like a mock-up of a spaceship, and she really loves space. So I like that they put that line in there.
Yeah,
that is so cool.
It's just cool to see that wonder about the world that used to be, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you would get for the younger generation who wasn't alive during the time that the apocalypse happened. And so that was a nice detail. And in my mind, that really made me like Ellie more. That was very bonding for me to the character, making the character likable, is to have that wonder, because that is a childlike emotion, and generally people react well to those kinds of things. So that was good on their part.
Yeah. Brief editor's note on the performance of the actress. She shouldn't have looked so relaxed as soon as the car started driving. This is her first time in a car. So why was she not like going, oh, we're moving and we're not walking, it's so cool. I would have liked to have seen that. Also, she somehow knew exactly where the cassette goes. So maybe Joel should have put it in there, but oh well. Either way, it was still nice.
She might not have seen a car, but they could still have like radios and stuff that are working in the Fedra school.
I did think about that, and I think cassettes, because I used to have cassettes, they load a different way than they do into most cassette players, but it's possible for sure. But she sure knew where the cassette was supposed to go, so. Okay, moving on now to favorite scene.
I think it's the end scene with the song.
Yeah.
It's a really good scene. It's probably mine too.
The beginning of their journey. Definitely like get a sense that this is now the start of the two of them bonding for real.
Yeah.
For real bonding. For me, my favorite scene was Joel deciding to take Ellie to Wyoming of his own accord, and Ellie starting to act like she is part of the team. So it was right before that. It was the scene where he comes back into the house and she had been sitting there and they have their discussion. So for me, that was the, we are both going to say we're going to continue together. Joel has decided on his own rather than feeling like he was forced to do it. And Ellie has agreed to be obedient. So basically a similar scene just happened a little earlier.
And also, him doing that, he's finally telling her what the plans are. He's including her in this.
In the decision making.
This is what I want to do. I want to get you to safety, and my brother's here. So he's offering up information about himself because it applies to the situation. We got a brother in Wyoming. He's with the Fireflies. We're going to go there, and hopefully he will know where it will be safe for you. Right? So he has volunteered more information than probably has the entire time he's been with Ellie prior to this. So that's also, we're seeing a change,
Yeah. Do you want to do predictions or ratings first? We kind of have mixed them up in the past.
I don't care.
First?
I don't know that I have a prediction. I'm so ashamed. I was so invested in this story. I so enjoyed it that my mind wasn't thinking, where am I going to go with it next? And to be honest, I didn't tend to do a lot more of projecting what I would do when it's a bad story. So I just enjoyed it so much. I don't have a prediction.
For predictions for me, I have two. We've been following Joel. This is Joel's story because we thought we were following Sarah, but it turns out we were actually following Joel. So I think this is actually a story about Joel. We don't even know anything about Ellie's past. We haven't followed her past. If we get it in a flashback, it's still not her story. So for me, this is going to end up in one of two ways. It's either going to end up with Ellie being with Joel forever for some reason, either because I just don't think they're going to part ways. Yeah, so one of two things happens. He either stays with Ellie at this lab or whatever she's going to go, or they get to the lab and maybe everybody's dead, or maybe this whole thing is this we're trying to find a cure is BS, like they haven't made any progress or something, and for some reason Joel and Ellie walk off into the sunset together, like they're just going to live as a father and daughter for the rest of their lives. So that's one thing that could happen. They stay together forever. Or this is going to have more parallel mirroring.
Okay.
The fate of Bill will reflect the fate of Joel, and he will die before the end of the story. Die for Ellie before then. So those are my two predictions, but it sounds like he's in part 2, so I guess he lives. But that was it for me.
Next, we get to a city where you get to deal with raiders for the first time.
Ooh.
So I'm excited about the raiders. Because also in the city, in the game, you find a brother duo. One is probably like 30s and the other is Ellie's age.
Okay.
So in the game, you go through a little bit of the city with them. But I think I heard that they took those characters out, so I don't know if they're replacing them or if they just took them out entirely to get rid of their section. But I'm interested to see what they do with that.
So that would make sense storytelling wise because there's a structure. What do they don't call it the hero's journey? Was it? Anyways, there's a structure among writing, and there's a point that they call the point of no return. And so what we've just seen is the point of no return. Joel has accepted that he's going to go as far as it takes to rescue his brother and find a place for Ellie, right? So he is committed. There's no turning back, and that's what it means, point of no return. And then normally what happens is you have the bulk of the story, which is gaining allies and making enemies. So it makes sense to find two brothers, and they could be either, right? They could be new allies or they could be new enemies. So in a strictly storytelling sort of way, I would expect to see over the next few episodes that's what we're going to see. Some friends made, some enemies made.
All right, ratings.
All right. If I feel it's disjointed, like Amber said, that the Frank and Bill's story doesn't really fit very comfortably. It threw me off. I kept waiting. So I'm going to take a ding on the episode rating for that. And then also, if I were rating just Bill and Frank's part and nothing else, I didn't care for the sex scene. Otherwise, I would have given that a 10. But because of the sex scene, because of the disjointedness, I'm going to give it an 8.
I'm going to give it a 9 because I still really, really liked it. And I still like how they're going. I just would have liked more Joel and Ellie, but that's just me personally.
For me, I am rating this 3 times. I'm rating Joel and Ellie 9 out of 10. We got to see some progress in their story. For Frank and Bill, they get an 8.5 out of 10 for the reasons that I felt I explained already. For this episode with the two plots together and the overall feeling of the whole story, I'm actually notching it down to a 7.5 out of 10 because this was about Joel and Ellie for me and this episode just wasn't. So there.
So good material.
Yeah, very good material. Like on its own, great. But yeah, like I said, I just felt like it didn't fit the main point of the story. So unless this is supposed to be Tales from the Apocalypse.
Okay, and I guess that's it.
Yep. All right, later.
Bye-bye.
Please like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. We respond to just about all of them. And check out our other videos.